want to tell you about something that happened to a friend of mine. He had to lock himself in because of a storm, because he felt that there, in the middle of the mountain, in the middle of nowhere, it was the only way to protect himself. He told me he heard laughter in the distance, outside. And they say that on that mountain, there are witches. But somehow, in that moment, he understood. He understood why they were mocking him. He realized where he had gotten himself into. For a second, he saw it clearly. What was in there with him was far worse than what awaited outside. Good evening, community. Tonight, I bring you a new tale from this small, storm-battered room, surrounded by shelves of books. The wind howls outside, and the thin windows barely keep the storm at bay. For this story, I'm going to ask you to be patient. It's one of those tales where you have to be fully immersed first, where you have to lose yourself in the place where it happened, to truly picture it. Once you can see it in your mind, you'll be ready to experience the terror that awaits. Please, remember, don't let your imagination run too far, and listen to the following story at your own risk. And seriously, if there are children or anyone who tends to get scared nearby, please ask them to leave or to listen later. I'm asking you to follow that advice. It's very important, truly. This is a strong story. And for everyone else, you have 10 seconds to change your mind, to look for another podcast that will calm you a little more, because once you enter, there's no turning back. My story begins with a warning. Listen to your grandmothers if you're lucky enough to still have them alive. There's no one in the world more concerned about you. Sometimes mothers worry too much about giving us lessons, about preparing us for life, but grandmothers, the only thing they want, the only thing they pray for, is that we're safe, that we don't have to go through events that leave permanent marks, even if those events might teach us lessons that will serve us for the rest of our lives. I say all this because what I'm about to tell you is a mixture of things I personally experienced and stories I was told, which together bring to life the most terrifying, most horrible night of my life. My grandmother's house is in the town where my mother was born, where her entire family was born. My mom moved to the capital to work, but everyone else stayed behind. I didn't meet them until my mom divorced my father. When I was 10 years old, for some reason he didn't want me to spend time with that side of my family, to peek into that part of my life. They welcomed me with a birthday party, and from that moment on, even though they were far away, they were the family that was always there. Unfortunately, my mother's family had the very bad luck of almost everyone dying too young. That large family in the town gradually grew smaller. I know there were others scattered around, but as the years went by, the only person I regularly visited was my grandmother, Julia, especially as she began to fall ill. My mom and I took turns so that every weekend at least one of us would go there to stay with Mama Julia, as I called my grandmother. And this community happened on a Friday. Not just any Friday. I know it may sound cliché, but it started on a Friday the 13th, the Friday the 13th of December 2013. I arrived and got off the bus passing through the town. It's so small that no one else got off there. Then I made my way to my grandmother's house. It was impossible not to notice every time I went, to pay attention, to see the shops where I had once run excitedly for candy as a child. Now fewer and fewer remained. One OXXO store somehow survived there with the few townspeople, having eaten up all the rest. My grandmother's house was almost at the end of the town. Climbing a street from where you could see everything, all the lights, every lamp on every street, every window, a view I still remember and love. I found my grandmother outside, worried, looking toward the forest, toward the trees, about 100 meters from her house where the mountain began. At first, I thought she was watering the plants, but soon I realized it was something different. She looked distressed. I asked what was happening, and as soon as she saw me, She hugged me. She told me that my Uncle Lalo had come to visit and left her very worried. He had spent a little time talking with her, had gone around checking how she was, but then he lost his mind again. He started talking to himself, saying things that didn't make sense, as if he were talking to someone else, as if answering someone who wasn't there. And then, as was often the case, he ran off into the forest. Uncle Lalo, my grandmother's nephew, my mother's youngest cousin, used to go through phases like this. He would disappear for weeks, go mad, get lost. Sometimes he went into the mountains, sometimes he appeared in another town. They say that once another uncle found him far away, near the border, and brought him back. My mother says it was because he got into a lot of drugs as a teenager. My grandmother believed it was because his mother had a debt with something else, that had been paid with her boy's sanity. Mama Julia believed strongly in witches, not in the way most of us imagine them, but real witches. In earlier times, there were many women who would perform works for people, helping with health, love, fortune. There was a solution for everything, an answer for every misfortune, but also a debt that sometimes wasn't collected immediately, yet never, truly never, went unpaid. Mama Julia didn't deal with them at all, and it was something from older times, from long ago. By the time I visited, I never saw anything myself, even though people said they had gone into the forest after once playing a trick on the mayor. Nothing. I never saw anything. And my grandmother always believed that Lalo's temporary madness was caused by them. By the witches. We went inside. She was about to give me some dinner because I had arrived tired, but I saw my grandmother, Mama Julia, very worried, the tension in her eyes never leaving them, glancing repeatedly toward the window that looked out to the hill. I hurried to eat and told her I would go look for Uncle Lalo, who might still be wandering there, dazed among the trees. She pointed toward the clouds in the distance. A storm would be coming soon. I replied that that was all the more reason to find my uncle quickly, so he wouldn't stay up there and something happened to him. Of course I worried about him, but above all about Mama Julia, because she wasn't able to handle such worries anymore. Every concern upset her. If I could find him, I would. Besides, I had spent so much time in those mountains with my cousins that I knew the area well. I wouldn't go somewhere I couldn't find my way back. Finally, I convinced my grandmother. She told me that my uncle was wearing a green scarf, one she had knitted herself, and to please not stay in the forest after midnight. I told her not to worry. It was barely 8 o'clock. At that moment, I didn't think it would take me more than an hour to find Uncle Lalo. Before I left, she said one more thing, a warning that for some reason felt much more serious, just before giving me her blessing. Whatever happens, son, even if the storm catches you, don't go to the Berlanga siblings' house. It's abandoned, but it's not alone. I knew this story. The Berlanga brothers were two elderly men, twins, who had always lived alone, in a small house on the hill. In a flat patch of land they used to grow everything they needed. That's how they made a living, and their house stood right in the middle of that field. I remember seeing it once as a child, though I had no idea how I got there. I never expected I'd have to see it that night. I went down the path I knew, the one that made me feel safe, and even though the wind started to pick up, I shouted out for my Uncle Lalo. They say sometimes the wind carries voices, and shouts even farther, so I trusted it would carry my voice and help me find him. As soon as I stepped into the trees, the sounds of the town faded. That strange silence of the forest was familiar to me. Every now and then, I could hear dogs barking in the distance, but nothing else, as if only they had permission to be heard. I walked for almost half an hour before I heard voices, calmly talking. I approached and saw two figures sitting by a dead campfire. It was dark, and I didn't want to shine my phone light on them, so I called out, "Good evening. "Have you seen anyone pass by here?" I asked it like that so they'd know I was from the town. Everyone knew everyone there, because I still had a doubt that they might be some strangers hiding out. In the dark, they looked like black silhouettes. The only thing I could see were the whites of their eyes. They turned to look at me. "Lalo, nothing happens around here at this hour," one said. "Nothing happens around here at this hour," the other immediately echoed. "He's my uncle. He's not well. He loses his mind and gets lost. We're worried something might happen to him up here. He's Julia's nephew. She's my grandmother." I said, "I think we know Julia." "Yes, we know Julia." "Yes, we know Julia," said one, and the other immediately followed, almost finishing each other's sentences. That felt strange to me. The town was tiny. Maybe it was because they were older, but I knew everyone there knew my grandmother. That's why I said her name, to make them understand who I was referring to, and to show that I wasn't suspicious. But no one's passed by here. Or we didn't see them pass. We didn't see them pass. We didn't see anyone. But keep climbing so you can find him soon. The storm's coming. You shouldn't be wandering around on nights like this. I thanked them, trying to be very polite, hoping it would keep me safe if they were dangerous. One of them, the one who had spoken first, stood up and moved a little closer. It was so dark among the trees that I couldn't make out his shape even a meter away. I couldn't see any details, his face, his clothes, nothing. Just a black shape near me, with only the eyes visible. "You know he's not alone, boy," he said in a very low voice, so only I could hear. "I know you have to find your relative, but tonight is not a good night to keep going." Then the figure sat back down beside the other, by the dead fire. As if I weren't even there, they continued talking. I said goodbye and started walking. After a few steps, I could no longer hear them. I was very worried. I had promised Mama Julia I would find him. I was scared to continue, but even more scared to turn back, having to tell her I hadn't found anything, that I didn't dare keep going because it was too dark. Who in their right mind could say that? I don't know how much farther I climbed, but to the right of the path, I saw a short trail leading into a field. There, without the shadow of trees, it stretched a little beyond the reach of my lamp. I saw a wild field overgrown with weeds, and in the middle, a small adobe house barely standing, the house of the Berlanga brothers. Above me, in the trees, I could see the storm approaching. I thought about what Mama Julia had said in her warning, but the little house didn't look like a place I'd even want to go near. I kept climbing, walking a little more. At times I turned off the lamp, because the last thing I wanted was for the battery to die. I couldn't be left in the dark up there, so I had to conserve power. I would turn the lamp off for long stretches while shouting. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and suddenly, I swear, I could even see better when the lamp was off. I continued, walking up the path that no longer seemed familiar. I started losing confidence, turning the lamp on, walking a little, looking at the ground, scanning around to see Uncle Lalo curled up somewhere, then turning it off again, trying to spot him in the pure darkness. Suddenly, when I turned the lamp off, I saw something ahead, in the dark, but clearly, a woman standing in the middle of the path I was following. The wind blew, the drizzle turned to rain. She held her shawl near her throat with one hand, hiding her face. Even at that distance, in that darkness, it would have been impossible to see her features. I tried to say good evening, but I couldn't. You haven't felt danger like that close before, the kind that doesn't look obvious, that hides in normality, but tells you not to trust anyone. The kind of danger that tightens your chest and stomach and screams at you to get away. That's what I felt. Something that wouldn't let me speak. I started remembering Mama Julia's fears, the stories I had heard about the witches hiding in the forest. The only thing I was sure of was that the short figure in front of me was not Uncle Lalo. So, without saying a word, I turned and began to descend. I glanced back to see if she was gone, but I could see the silhouette closer. She was running toward me. I turned off my lamp and started running downhill, into complete darkness. I couldn't see the ground, nothing, absolutely nothing, but I kept running, letting my knees carry me forward, pushed by the slope that was getting steeper with every step. The woman behind me kept pace, running as fast as I was. I realized that if I wanted to escape this, I had to risk everything and run as fast as I could. I thought I might make it back to the dead campfire, to the people who had warned me, but at the same time, I felt I wouldn't hold on. I had to think fast. Suddenly, I felt something on my jaw, in my mouth, in my nose, a sharp, burning pain deep inside my head. Mud had gotten into my mouth and eyes. I had fallen flat on my face. I don't know how much farther I tumbled, but the first thing I did was get up, only to hear something moving through the underbrush, a sound I could have sworn was laughing. "That's what you wanted. To scare me so I'd break my face, right?" I yelled into the darkness, angry, somehow hoping it was just that, praying to God that they only wanted to scare me, begging to be let go so I could keep descending. The storm had fully arrived by then. I tried to pull myself together, to keep moving downhill, but water began rushing along the path. I looked around in the dark. I couldn't see her, but I could feel something following me, now between the trees. The path was nearly disappearing. It seemed impossible to follow. Then, to my left, there was the field, and in the middle of it, the little house. My grandmother's warning, Mama Julia's, was still fresh in my mind, but so was my instinct to survive, telling me to find shelter, a place where I could wait out the storm. A lightning strike had fallen dangerously close. The house was the only refuge nearby, from the storm and whatever was following me. I ran across the field as fast as the thick undergrowth would allow. This had once been a field where everything could grow, where crops thrived. A few meters from the house, I glanced back toward the trees, into the pitch-black darkness. I don't know if it was the storm flashing in my eyes or just the adrenaline, but I thought I saw something in the treetops where I had come from. Figures, women in black, perched on the thinnest branches that shouldn't have held their weight. At least 3 of them. I ran to the house and knocked. The air smelled of earth and abandonment. I opened the door. It was obvious no one was inside, so I went in. There were a few leaks, but mostly it was dry. I could wait out the storm there. I remembered the story of this place, because, as I mentioned before, this wasn't just about what I had experienced. It was also about the stories I had heard. Many years ago, this had been a huge deal in the town. Police had arrived, not the rural officers we were used to, but city cops in plain clothes, searching house to house for a woman no one recognized from the photos. Among them were 3 who seemed kind at first, but who could be more aggressive than the rest. At first, the townspeople thought they were the bosses. Later, the truth came out. Those 3 weren't police, they were priests. The woman they were searching for had escaped, or someone had helped her. They said she had been possessed and kept in a convent for months while doctors, priests, bishops, and cardinals waited for Vatican approval to perform an exorcism. But when the ritual was finally allowed, someone had let her go. Someone had opened the doors she needed to leave the convent. How they knew she was in the town, no one knows. They searched for days, then disappeared. But no one in the town mentioned there was another house to check. One not in the town itself, but up in the hills, in the middle of a field, the house of the Berlanga brothers. No one knew if she had gone there asking for help or if someone had hidden her there. People gathering firewood or hunting said they heard screams coming from that house. Shouts of men and women, curses yelled aggressively. It was said that one afternoon, the brothers went down to the town for milk, eggs, and cleaning supplies. The shopkeeper found it strange because the brothers had animals up there, chickens, goats, and rarely went down just for groceries. Sometimes they sold animals or traded. Weeks passed, and the voices and screams stopped. The brothers no longer worked the fields. Crops ready for harvest rotted. Chickens disappeared. One goat came down starving and thirsty, ending up in the town. When people went up to check, they claimed they found a horrifying scene. The woman had been there, but the brothers were gone. The city priests returned that night, and by morning, they had taken everything. I had always thought these were just legends, folklore, a poetic way to explain the death of two elderly men. But in that moment, inside that house, I couldn't stop imagining it was all true. That the house had hidden a possessed woman. And yet, it couldn't be. After being chased by crazy old women through the hills, I couldn't possibly have such bad luck to end up there. I heard laughter in the distance, outside, among the trees. Somehow, I understood in that moment why they were mocking me. I realized where I had gotten myself into. For a second, I had the realization. If I truly wasn't alone, if the stories were true, if my grandmother was right, what was in that house with me was worse than what was outside. Inside, there were two rooms, one large and one smaller, which I think was the bedroom. The door was closed, but if I listened carefully above the storm outside, I could sense someone was there. It was abandoned, but it wasn't alone. Mama Julia's words echoed in my head. Where had I fallen? Where had I gotten myself into? I opened the door with some effort. A solid wooden door, heavy as if it were meant for the outside, barely hanging on rusty hinges inside. There was no one there, nothing. Only a strange, unpleasant smell. On the floor lay a candle. I couldn't recognize the saint anymore. It seemed carved as if someone had tried to erase it. Luckily, I had a lighter. I still smoked back then and lit one. My cigarettes had gotten wet from the fall, but I managed to save one. It tasted like a small comfort, a little bit of normalcy. After a while, I heard something. It sounded like scratching along the wall. I tried to focus and realized it came from behind me. Then it moved. Something was scratching the wall outside, moving around the house. I heard it clearly as it passed by the window, scraping glass and not adobe, but I couldn't see anything. I could only listen. My stomach twisted with fear, a pressure that felt like it was filling me from the inside, like I needed to expel something, but there was nothing. Only a few rusty kitchen tools lay scattered around. I needed one. I started moving them. The pressure inside me wouldn't relent. I had to get it out. Desperation took over. I searched, ignoring the filth, ignoring what I might find. Finally, I found a small folding knife. It would be enough, I thought, to cut the pressure, to dig my fingers in and relieve it. I took off my shirt and felt along my stomach, finding the spot just above the ribs, where the pressure was worst. I hoped this small cut would relieve it. There was nothing to clean the knife with, but I aimed for a clean slice, just enough to let me dig in. I put the closed knife in place and made the cut. The first jolt of pain hit, and I immediately regretted it. I woke up. What the hell was I doing? How could I even think about hurting myself like that? Why did it feel normal? What was in this house with me? I heard laughter inside the empty room. I moved toward the door, but out in the field, at the entrance to the trees, on the path where I had come, there it was. I don't know if it was the same figure, but I saw a woman in black holding her shawl to keep it from the storm. With her other hand, she gestured for me to come closer. What the hell was I supposed to do? What would you have done? The bedroom door creaked as if moving, but I turned back and saw it, barely ajar. I looked outside again. The woman walked toward the trees and disappeared from view. Then, from the tall weeds surrounding the field, 2 more figures in black emerged, running after her. They were waiting for me, and if it was a trap, waiting for me to step out. Luckily, I hadn't dared. I sat in the doorway with my hand on the door. I would stay inside, but if anything came out of that room, if the candle went out and left me in darkness, I would run. I would face whatever was out there in the forest. Present. I leaned back, exhausted. I opened my eyes. Without realizing it, I had already stood up. I heard something from the small room, like someone eating. The door was still slightly open, and I approached. The candlelight revealed a horrifying scene. A woman sat there. She wore a necklace that seemed to be something unidentifiable. She was perched on a mass of flesh and blood, over what had once been 2 bodies. Blood streamed from her mouth. Her eyes were white, her arms stretched out to the sides, one up, one down, like a figure I had once seen drawn, a demonic shape. She didn't look at me, but it wasn't necessary. Those blank eyes pierced my soul. I felt her. I turned to run. Nothing else mattered. But at the doorway, there I was, sitting, asleep. It was as if, for a moment, I realized I had detached from my body. I opened my eyes again. I was sitting at the little house's doorway, hearing the sounds in the room. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I didn't dare peek. Whatever I had just seen, however I had seen it, was enough. I left the house and began walking through the tall field when I heard movement in the grass, followed by a voice. "Run!" I obeyed immediately. The voice sounded like my Uncle Lalo's, but I didn't hesitate. I ran. It must have been around 4 in the morning, but I could see enough to find the path downhill before sunrise. Somehow, I found the strength, the ability to see where I was running. I soon reached the dead campfire, with no figures around, but I knew I was heading in the right direction. I got home just before dawn. It had stopped raining, but my grandmother was still praying, exhausted. She hadn't slept a moment, waiting for me to return. She told me I couldn't get lost. Not me. And she made me swear I would never climb the mountain alone again. I promised her I wouldn't, and I cried. Crying for her, for the fear, for what I had just seen, because I was exhausted, because everything ached, because my soul hurt, and because I hadn't been able to find my Uncle Lalo. I fell asleep deeply and woke around 2 in the afternoon. When my grandmother went to the market, I went to ask 2 acquaintances from the village to accompany me back up to the Berlanga house. I had to see it. I had to go back, to see if my uncle was there. On the way up, they told me everything they knew about that place, about that house. They said the police had found something horrible up there when searching for the woman, but no one knew exactly what it had been. Whatever it was, it had almost driven the poor souls who saw it insane. We reached the house, and it was empty. I went inside. There was no sign of anything, only my burned-out candle. I had truly been there that night. For some reason, we were asked to leave just a few minutes after arriving, and of course, I obeyed. I didn't want to spend another moment in that place. As we left, one of my friends noticed something. At first, he thought it was a person in the branches, and we panicked. But then we saw clearly a scarecrow, now dwarfed by the overgrown weeds around it. It had been almost hidden. It wore a green sweater. I thought it was my Uncle Lalo, but the sweater was old, dirty, torn, covered in dirt, as if it had been there for years. After that, nothing more was ever heard of my Uncle Lalo. He never recovered from that episode. My mother, Julia, died soon after from the illness we had been caring for her. Since then, I have never returned to that place. It must be even more abandoned now, more desolate. Nothing waits for me there, except perhaps, in some way, that house that still seems to speak. But far away, I feel I can silence that voice, I can ignore it. I am calm, even if I still see something there, even if I wait for someone, or something, to take it away, to release it. If that ever happens, I only hope that whatever is there has forgotten about me, or that it never manages to reach me.